Good morning, friends. It's Saturday, and I'm back with Chapter 10 of my upcoming book, Campaign at Fort Stix. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the mists of time with a story I call New Quarters. Sitting in the shade of the big tree at the corner of the garage, I watched my dad leave in his truck. We were supposed to be going to get new chickens and ducks this morning, but he said he had to meet a guy to discuss a new shop. At dinner the night before, he revealed the reason for Aunt Florence's visit yesterday. It seems the paint fumes from Dad's auto body work in the garage were constantly drifting down the hill and causing her to have headaches. She also did not like the noise from the compressor and the tools he used to do the work. Mom actually seemed happy to hear he would be moving the work somewhere else. Maybe she didn't like the noise and smells either. I wasn't sure, but was kind of surprised at her reaction. So, instead of getting new animals, I found myself sitting in the shade, looking at the new chicken coop we built. It was a lot nicer than the one we built in Arizona a few years ago. That one had simply been chicken wire wrapped around posts and over the top, with a plywood lean-to inside for the chickens to get under for shade or if it rained. The new coop stretched along the front of the garage from the corner under the big tree where I sat, almost to the doors. The front and side that faced the field were simply chicken wire wrapped around posts, but the top was made from corrugated metal panels which hung over the front more than a foot to ensure rainwater didn't run down into the coop. On the side nearest the garage doors, we built a wall between the posts and installed a real door. The door was made of solid wood and very heavy. Dad found the door hidden behind some stuff in the back of the garage and decided it would be fine for the chicken coop. When I first saw it, I was amazed that I had not noticed it when I was looking for the door to Fort Stix. Along the garage wall at the back of the coop were 3 levels of brood boxes, and lengths of closet dowel were hung in front of them to give the chickens somewhere to perch and roost. All in all, it was a fine example of a chicken coop. At Mom's request, we also put in fence posts and stretched green plastic fence around the backyard, from one corner of the house back nearly to my garden and up to the other side. She said she wanted a place for her dog to be able to go outside without her having to worry about it wandering off. I wondered what dog she meant, since we had not had a dog since her Maltese died a few years before. Was she planning to get a new dog? I got up from the tree and started to walk to Fort Stix. As I stepped from under the tree, the sun was very intense, and I knew it would be hot in my fort without any windows, so I changed direction for the house. Mark was lying on his bed reading, and I agreed this looked like a good idea. Going to the box of books Grandpa gave me, I grabbed one of my outdoor magazines and settled back on the bed. It did not take long to get lost in an article about hunting elk in the Rocky Mountains. Walking slowly down a draw between 2 ridges, with ears attuned to the slightest noise. On either side, the hills were covered by a mix of aspen and pine trees. The leaves of the aspen trees were in varying shades of reds and yellow, a sure sign fall was in progress and winter snows would soon come. Tall, lush grass filled the draw knee-high, swaying gently in the breeze and coming up the draw. Elk were known to bed along the edges of the draw, and several places where the grass was matted down, indicating something had bedded there, were apparent. Stopping behind a large tree and peeking around to see what might be ahead, a light steam could be seen rising from a flattened area of grass. Elk droppings, and they were very fresh. Time to be ultra quiet and observant. As big as they were, a full-grown elk had the ability to stand perfectly still for long periods, making them hard to spot. Standing still behind the tree, every shadow and stick is studied intensely. The droppings indicated an elk was here within the last few minutes. He may not have gone far. Look at the trees. Look through the trees and see what is there. A slight movement is seen ahead, but it's just the flicker of a squirrel's tail. The squirrel is not aware of the hunter, but it is watching something just to the left of its tree. Eyes shift in that direction, peering closely through the trees. There's a shadow that seems out of place. Looking closer at the shadow, it looks furry. A closer look reveals it's the edge of an elk mane, as the line of the shoulder blade is apparent in the bright area. Then the head lifts from where it was eating something, and a huge set of antlers pivots up between the trees. This is a trophy elk. Stifling a gasp of surprise so as not to give away the position, a small call is raised to the lips and blown gently. It's a cow call, made to entice the bull into thinking a mate is nearby. Several slow calls are blown, and the call is quickly tucked into the shirt as hands move to ready the bow and arrow. Bull elk will sometimes walk calmly in the direction of a cow, or they might charge at full speed. In either case, the hunter must be ready. The horns turn, indicating the bull is looking for the cow, but he stands still. He's looking for the cow. From behind the tree, the call is blown again, a little harder to indicate the cow has moved closer. The big bull steps forward 2 steps behind a large tree and tips his head back in preparation to bugle. He's going to call to the cow and show his strength with his bugle. He can be heard to draw a deep breath and quack, 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 quack. That is not the bugle of a bull elk. Pulled suddenly from the story, I look over at Mark and see he's not reading anymore, but has decided to play with his toys. He moves the arrow and pulls the string so the toy now makes the sound of a pig. I consider telling him to be quiet, but I know if I do, it'll only end up in an argument. So I refrain and let him stay in his happy place. Putting the magazine down, I jump from the bed and go into the living room. I wish I had my own room. I look out the window over the desk by the bathroom door and see it's still very bright outside. That surely means it is hot outside, and I don't want to be hot. Then I remember Dad saying something about turning part of the enclosed front porch into another bedroom. I walk out to the front area and look around. Nothing changed since we moved in, and the area had pretty much been ignored. My aunt and mother had cleaned the windows and washed the curtains, but other than that, it remained as when I first saw it. Since there was a sink on one side, I wondered if maybe that could eventually be converted to a bathroom. The other side contained an old sofa and overstuffed chair. Across from these was a small cabinet with an antique record player, next to a large box full of old records I had noticed the first night. Looking at it now, I realized this must have been the waiting area for the customers here to get their hair cut. It should make a nice room for me. The first order of business was to investigate the boxes piled on the couch. They were mostly filled with old papers like tax returns and business receipts, except for one which contained roughly 24 pint-sized canning jars and lids. I moved them across to the opposite side of the room and stacked them around the old barber chair. When I was done, I had to open the front door to let a breeze in and clear out the dust. Once the dust settled and I could breathe without sneezing a lot, I opened the doors on the small cabinet. It was empty, except for a ledger book. I opened the ledger. It was filled with neat writing which detailed the distribution of my great-uncle's moonshine business. The names and places in it meant nothing to me, but at the end I found 2 pages which listed his recipes for both moonshine and root beer. I went to my room and grabbed my notebook and a pen to copy the recipes. I had no intention of making moonshine, but the root beer recipe was highly desired. Once I was done copying the recipes, I put the ledger into one of the boxes on the other side of the room. Finally, there were a few drawers in the cabinet. The first one was empty except for some old dime roller papers from the bank. I added these to the boxes and opened the second drawer to find it filled with an assortment of items. It was a junk drawer, and there were screws, curtain hooks, door lock assemblies for the old-fashioned doors of the house, skeleton keys, and an old-time church key used for opening soda bottles. I put the church key in my pocket immediately and went off to find an empty coffee can. There was a couple of empty coffee cans in the garage, and I took them back to the front porch. It did not take long to empty the contents of the drawer into the coffee cans. I reserved a couple of skeleton keys and one lock assembly with the intention of using it to secure Fort Stix. One could not be too safe in guarding their treasures. I set the cans on the front porch to be carried to the garage and went inside to find my mother's vacuum cleaner. I figured I would just keep the couch and chair in the room because they looked comfortable, but they would definitely have to be cleaned first. After erupting more clouds of dust by removing the cushions from the couch and chair, I got busy with the vacuum. I was quite surprised that the cushions and couch fabric were actually a shade of white with flower patterns and not the light gray they had appeared at first. Sitting on the couch to admire my work, I relaxed back onto it and realized it was big enough that I could sleep comfortably on it. Then I also realized that I had not yet opened the third drawer of the cabinet. I jumped up and reached for the drawer, wondering what manner of treasure I would find in there. I was not disappointed. Lying in several neat rows on a soft towel at the bottom were a dozen canning jars with glass handles. I immediately recognized these as tea jars, just like I had seen in my outdoor magazines. The picture that came to mind was of a girl in a Victorian dress sitting on a tree swing with one of these jars full of tea and a mint leaf on the edge. I decided right then and there they might be called tea jars, and my great-uncle probably used them to serve moonshine to his guests, but now they were going to be my root beer jars. I closed the drawer carefully and flopped back on the couch. When I did, I heard a jingling sound and stuck my hand down into the cushions to investigate. When my hand came out, it was full of old coins from the 40s and 50s. There was an assortment of pennies, nickels, and dimes, along with a few quarters and one silver dollar. I quickly stashed these in my pocket and reached in to see if there were any more. As I lay on the end of the couch, reaching deeply into the crack under the cushion, my head was hanging over and I saw something in the corner formed by the chair and the couch arms. It was an aquarium. I did not feel any more coins, so I switched my attention to the aquarium. I had to move the chair away from the corner to get at the aquarium, but when I brought it out and brushed the dust from it, I knew I had found a new habitat for collecting bugs. I carried it into the bedroom and put it on the dresser. Mark looked up from his toys and, seeing the glass box, immediately asked, "What's that?" "It's a terrarium," I said, smiling. "What's a terrible-arium?" he asked. "No, terrarium," I corrected. "It's a bug house where you can put bugs and watch them." "Why do you want to watch bugs?" he asked. I was already tired of his barrage of questions and turned to head back to the porch. I called back over my shoulder, "'Cause they do neat stuff like eat each other." I heard him saying, "Ew," as I disappeared around the corner, and then I remembered my books. Going back into the room, I grabbed my box of books and took them to the porch. Setting the books next to the cabinet, I grabbed a rag and wiped off the old record player. The needle made a rumbling noise through the megaphone as I wiped it, so I was pretty sure it would work. Reaching into the box of records, I took out the first one and put it on. I turned it on and gently sent the needle onto the record. I was immediately rewarded with the sound of classical music. I liked it. At that moment, I was feeling pretty good. Listening to the music, I took the books from the box and stacked them in the cabinet behind the doors. Now I had a place where I could come and read and relax when I wanted to, and I had even found a few treasures. As I was setting the empty box across the room with the others, I saw my dad drive up and pull in beside the house. I grabbed the coffee cans of junk and headed for the garage. Hopefully, Dad would be taking us to get the new ducks and chickens in a little while, and I was excited to have new animals to care for. He was just getting out of the truck when I walked up carrying the cans. "What's in the coffee cans, Kevin?" he asked. "Just some hardware and stuff from the drawer on the front porch. I was going to put them in the garage in case you need them." I went into the garage and put the cans on the workbench. When I came back out, Mark was over by Dad's truck, asking if we were going to get the chickens yet, and was even more excited than I was when he said yes. We piled into the truck and headed for the hardware store once again. In addition to the chickens and ducks, Dad also decided to get a half a dozen turkeys. We had a rainbow of colors in boxes in the bed of the truck. White Cornish hens, Rhode Island red chickens, black and white mottled barred rock chickens, yellow fuzzy ducklings, and turkeys with thin white feathers and pink skin. There was also several feeders, waterers, a bale of hay, and a few bags of chicken food. Arriving back at the house, Dad first put the boxes of birds in the shade of the garage while we prepared the coop for its new residence. Hay was stuffed into the brood boxes and strewn on the ground under the brooders and roosts. Feeders were filled and spaced apart to ensure the birds could get at all sides, and then the waterers were also placed. When he carried the boxes of birds into the coop, I was expecting him to empty the birds out and bring the boxes out. Instead, he gently tipped the boxes on their sides after nestling them in the hay and let the birds decide if they wanted to walk out or not. Obviously, Mark expected to see the birds as well. "Why are they still in the boxes?" Mark asked, pressing his face against the chicken wire. "It gives them time to get used to the new home while they're still being able to smell what they're used to in the boxes," Dad said and came out of the coop. "You guys make sure to lock this door after you feed and water the birds every day. We do not want to have to try and catch these birds if they get loose in the woods, and bobcats or possums will get them." We all stood around the coop watching for a while as one by one the birds left the comfort of the boxes and began to explore the coop. The height of the brooder boxes and roosts seemed a bit much for the tiny chicks, but I knew in time they would grow and reach up there with no problem. At least they had the boxes to sleep in. It wasn't long before the coop was full of the sounds of chicks peeping as they investigated the water and food left for them. I noticed the sun was getting low and wandered off to Fort Stix to deposit my treasures found earlier in the day. When I opened the door to Fort Stix, I was blasted by a wave of hot air. I really needed to get some windows installed because it was like an oven in there. It only took me a few minutes to get the skeleton keys, lock parts, and church key out of my pockets, but by the time I was outside again, I was soaked in sweat. I locked the door and headed to the house to see what was for dinner. Mom had dinner on the table when I got in, hot dogs and macaroni and cheese with a glass of punch. I sat down next to Mark and my dad and wasted no time, as I was very hungry. When we finished eating, everyone moved off to their areas of the house and I went to the front porch. I flipped the switch next to the front door, but it only turned on the porch light outside. Turning it back off, I searched around but was not able to locate a switch for the inside. Looking at the walls and ceiling, I saw there was no light fixture to turn on. Then over in the corner behind the barber chair, I saw a floor lamp. I grabbed it and put it in the corner between the chair and couch. When I plugged it in, it came right on and gave a nice glow in that corner of the room. I also discovered the power switch was located on the cord, which hung down just above the arm of the couch. As I lay back on the couch, I could reach it easily and thought this was rather useful. I grabbed one of my magazines and began to read about a hunting trip. This time, we were trekking through the hills of Montana seeking big mule deer bucks. Sitting on a hillside, glassing the valley below, I drifted off to sleep just as a big muley was spotted resting underneath an overhanging tree. I hope you enjoyed this look into the campaign at Fort Stix. That's all for now, but I'll be back again next week with another story. just for you. Until then, sleep well.